Welcome to the Business Spotlight series. My name is Kay Cote, and I am your podcast host here at Action Coach in Central Texas. Today, I have Riley Knox, CEO and co-founder of Leviathan Air, as my guest. Today, we're going to be talking about his business, his journey to business ownership, his challenges, and best practices that he's learned on his journey. We're going to be sharing a sneak peek into what it's really like to own and operate a business. If this is your first time on our channel, be sure to like and subscribe to get notifications of episodes like this. Welcome to the show, Riley. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, I'd love to dive into learn a little bit about you and your role with your business.
Yeah, so I am CEO and co-founder, and basically that means I do pretty much everything all the time. That's one of the things they don't talk about. When you're CEO, your role is basically everything, and just trying to make sure anyone who's working with you or for you has everything that they need to be able to do their job.
Oh, definitely. Well, dive into what is your business and who do you serve?
Yeah, so what we are doing is building flying cargo ships. And I say that to be a bit provocative, but at the same time, it's 100% literal. So these are essentially specialized seaplanes, specifically ground effect vehicles that take off on the ocean, fly super close to the surface of the water to get a dramatic increase in efficiency, and then land on the water on the other side. And basically, what it means is being able to transport massive amounts of cargo at aircraft speeds across oceans, but at a fraction of the cost and CO2 emissions of standard air freight. And the reason why I say building flying cargo ships is because if everything works out how it's supposed to on the regulatory side, these will actually be certified with the Coast Guard as a cargo ship instead of having to go through typical FAA certification. And
Oh,
our
wow.
prime, yeah, and the primary customers that we're going to be working with is going to be like freight forwarders, maybe down the road, primary operators like UPS, FedEx, basically anyone who's needing to have stuff shipped across oceans, but that needs it done faster than your normal cargo ship.
Okay, this is really incredible. I'm super excited to dive in and learn more about this. And what phase are you at with the business now? Like, do you have these cargo ships flying?
No, no, we are still very early on. So we've basically been working on it. We actually just came out of stealth mode a couple of months, not a few weeks ago. Been working on it for the better part of a year, basically doing all of the really in-depth initial and numerical analysis and design studies to basically make sure that these will work, even though we know that these will work. The Soviet Union built ones in the same size range that we're trying to do, and they did that back in the 60s and 70s and showed that it works, that it flies, that they can actually operate in surprisingly rough conditions as well. And now that we have basically proved it to ourselves, not just on the actual efficiency side and capability side, but more importantly on the economic side, that it actually makes sense for how much we think we need to be kind of undercutting air freight to overcome switching costs, that the numbers actually make sense, that it would be not just profitable but incredibly compelling. And once we kind of really validated that to ourselves and got initial team together, so myself, my co-founder, world-class aerodynamics aerospace engineer, pulled together a whole bunch of amazing advisors and are now actually in the process of raising our first round. And so that gets us to actually be able to start building some initial prototypes and really start to move through the major milestones of the development process.
Wow, this is incredible. I love the technology that you're working on. I kind of like to dive in. Do you currently have any employees on board, or what does that structure look like?
Right now, it's just me and my co-founder. And we have a few other people helping us out just because they think it's fun and cool, which is nice. That's really what we're kind of raising for right now, is to be able to bring on those first key hires to start filling out all of the other expertise roles that we're going to need, especially early on.
Oh, definitely. And when is your like trajectory of having one of these ships ready for testing?
Smaller scale prototypes by the end of the year. What we're then we'll have probably a 1/10 to maybe a 1/8 scale flying in another year or so after that. And then we'll start working on the full size ones. Still figuring out exactly how big we're going to try and go to start off with. Ideally, it would be the full size ones. There are some potential applications for some smaller ones that would be easier and faster to develop, but we're still exploring those options.
Okay, that's incredible. So who would be like your target audience with these? Like, would it be like consumers like myself, or would it be more like Amazon? What's kind of your target market?
It would actually be the companies that companies hire to handle their logistics supply chain. So freight forwarders is going to be our really kind of target customer we're going to be going after, which they're essentially responsible for building out and planning and setting up the supply chain of moving something from one side of an ocean to another, because it's not just either the flying part or it's sitting on a boat part. There's picking it up from the customer warehouse, then getting it repackaged or do any adjustments that need to be done there, then getting it delivered to the port or to the airport, and then doing that whole process on the other side. And it's up to freight forwarders to basically plan out and manage all of that process, hire the trucks to do the pickup, to do the transfer, warehousings to do any repackaging that are needed. If it's going to be, say, going on air freight, it needs to get put on air pallets. If it's going to be going like less than container load, it needs to get repackaged into a container with a bunch of other people's stuff. And then you got to do all of that on the opposite side in reverse. And so freight forwarders will basically contract with us to handle that moving it across water part. So everything else in their system, how they do everything, will ideally be as close to exactly the same as possible, except instead of taking ready to go air freight pallets and having them dropped off at the airport, they will just drop them off at our facility on one side of the ocean. We'll move it to the other side, hand it back to them, and then it continues on its way.
Oh, that is cool. I kind of want to dive into your marketing, like how like are you putting the word out about this and how are you doing it? And like who's kind of like your target market right now?
Yeah, right now it's the intention, yes, we are, but it's not so much trying to actually sell anything yet. It's more so just starting to build these initial customer relations, maybe getting like letters of intent, things like that in place to help us on our fundraising side. But it's all very early and it's mostly just direct outreach, getting connected with individual people at companies that we think would be a good fit and just starting to get those conversations going.
Okay, that's good to know too, kind of like getting an idea around what you're working towards. And obviously this is a very unique concept, very cool. Why do your customers choose you when you have, when everything's said and done, why do your customers choose you?
So the two big reasons, and it basically you have to look at it from the two different sides. You've got on the air freight side, what it's ultimately going to come down to is that we will be providing essentially the same service at nearly the same travel time, maybe just a little bit longer, but we're not talking a whole lot compared to how fast air freight is, but
Mhm.
cut the cost in half, maybe even more than
Mm.
that. So that's thousands of dollars per ton, which is substantial. When you're talking about shipping large amounts of goods. On the other side, where we're actually looking as far as the numbers that we're running, we're actually getting into now everything's always kind of shifting and adjusting. And so this is just kind of like as of right now slash a little while ago. Actually in the same realm as what's called less the container load ocean freight shipping. So for anyone who's not actually shipping enough to fill up like an entire like 40-foot container or multiple ones, it's what they call less than container load. And it usually involves their stuff getting mixed with other people's stuff to fill up a container, and then they unpack it on the other side. That's a bit more expensive than like a full container, which is the cheapest way you can possibly ship stuff.
Mhm.
Our numbers are actually getting into the realm of less than container load shipping. So that means for those customers, they would be paying kind of in around the same price, but they could now get their goods transported 20 or 30 or 40 times faster when you're looking at door-to-door travel times.
Mhm.
Which so it's a substantial increase in their logistics time, but without having to pay multiple times more like they would for air freight.
Oh, definitely. So I kind of like to dive into the why behind all of this. Like, what inspired you to go into this business to begin with?
I watched a YouTube video. Um, yeah. So there's the video came out about 4 years ago. It's put out by what is now one of my favorite YouTube channels. Shout out Mustard. Um, and it was basically like, hey, look at this crazy thing that the Russians were doing back in the 60s and 70s. And it was all about the ground effect vehicles they were building then. And it was me being the very nerdy mechanical engineer that I am, watched it. And I was like, okay, this is really cool. Why don't we have these now? Because the
Mhm.
physics makes sense and the core aspects of the technology make sense. They showed it worked, that it achieved all the primary goals that they were wanting. And the more I looked into it, it was kind of a bit of stuff on the tech side. And the nice thing is, basically, all of that has gotten fully figured out in the last 5 to 10 years. And then just kind of will to do it and the kind of ambition and risk to actually build these large size versions of these and get them out there. And it's kind of unfortunate because a lot of the big players today, whether it's Boeing or Lockheed or any of these other ones, they don't take those big, huge risks anymore. So it's kind of left down to someone like me who not only sees the potential of it and knows that this exists, but that's also willing to take the big, huge risk of starting a company and trying to literally kind of change how a core aspect of the world works.
Wow, that's very cool. I like to nerd out on stuff too. So I love that that was what inspired you to do this. It's very incredible. Kind of diving in a little further into that, what are your goals? I know we covered about the planes, but what are your goals within the next 3 years?
Next 3 years are to absolutely having what we're calling our subscale demonstrator prototype flying, which would be about a 30 to 35 foot wingspan, and be well on the way to having the first full size one developed and built. That'll still be a bit out from there, but yeah, that's pretty much the next 3 years. Is just going to be lots of raising money and building prototypes and raising more money and building more prototypes, and then just rinse and repeat until we get the full size one flying.
Okay, very cool. Well, I'd like to dive into a fun section of questions, which is our rapid fire section. And this is where we just ask you for those top of mind answers, just as yourself as a business owner. Are you ready for some rapid fire?
Let's do it.
All right. Question number one is, what is the key to success for you?
Perseverance. Yeah.
And that is a great answer. And what is one piece of advice you have for other business owners?
Um, Keep going. Yeah, that's usually it. Keep going. It's pretty much just you just don't stop until you like are forced to stop.
And what is a book or piece of content, could be a podcast, anything that you've taken in most recently?
Ooh, that I literally have to pull it up on my app really fast because I'm having to remember exactly what I was reading because I do everything through audiobooks because
Mhm.
that way then I can do it while I'm like in the car or doing other stuff. Um, um, How to Be Startup Hero is a pretty good one. And Organizational Velocity. That is another really good one. It's all about how to have a very innovation-minded company culture.
Oh, I like that too. I'm writing that one down. Um, and our final question is, if you had to choose only one area of business to improve on tomorrow, what would it be?
Ooh, like my business or just business as a whole?
With what you're working on currently.
Um, I'd like there to be a whole lot more zeros in the bank account, preferably after a number as opposed to before the number. That would be one of the biggest ones. But that's as a startup, that's literally always the case. Um, and past that, it's getting even more connected with amazing future talent.
Hmm. Well, this is your time to share your information now, to get connected, and just to have people connect with what you're working on. How can people find you online?
Yeah, I mean, on all of our socials, Leviathan Air, I think it's Leviathan_Air on pretty much everything. On YouTube, got some fun videos up there. Website, leviathan-air.com, although it's super, super basic, mostly because we're still a startup and there's only so many hours in the day.
Well, thank you so much for your time. And now for our final question, what is most inspiring to you today?
Seeing the fact that the United States is finally starting to get back to building real things. That there's this whole push back to manufacturing, making things. There was just Deep Tech Week out in San Francisco that I was out there for last month. That was amazing. You had Reindustrialize up in Detroit. You have massive new semiconductor facilities and all of these other things starting to happen, to where for a very long time I think the US thought that we didn't actually have to make anything if we could just think up everything, and now we're realizing that, one, you can only do so much with software before you have to build new real things, and we need to be doing it more here. And the fact that that's really starting to ramp back up and happen makes me very excited for the future.
Oh, definitely. Well, thank you so much for this inspiring conversation. I'm really excited to follow your journey. So thanks for taking the time to be on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.